Good morning and welcome to our first of this year's online parent education talks brought to you by the CCC, who are sitting in the background of this call. I've got three members today who I'm delighted. We've got new members of the Cranley Community Committee. I'll be talking about that in a few moments, but I just wanted to say welcome to you all. Thank you for joining me today to talk about one of the most important things that we ever deal with as parents. It's Digital Safety Week, and this is something we put on the calendar 2 years ago. Because we know that this matters so much to you as parents, that we keep abreast of new developments and that we're educating ourselves, because how else do we help our children grow up in this brave new world that they are living in? As I said, thank you to the CCC. This is my third year now delivering these talks. They are funded by the CCC. We have had some excellent speakers, and our speaker today is no different. I'm really excited that she'll be joining us. We try to listen to you as parents about what matters, what are your priorities when it comes to helping you to help your children. And that's why we have focus weeks and events throughout the school year. Coming up at the end of this term, we have World Mental Health Day, Kindness Week. We have had Mindful March and Make a Wish March over the last 3 years. And coming up again in April, we have actually for the first time Anti-Bullying Week, because we have been listening. Thank you for your feedback in surveys that we've sent out. And we know that this is a huge area of concern for you as parents. So we will be starting the year with Kindness Week, and we'll be near on ending the year with Anti-Bullying Week, and making sure that we give these two areas our focus. I would like to make sure you are all aware about our CCC barbecue that's taking place on the 6th of October. It's in the evening. It's going to be lovely and cool by then. It's guaranteed. We're going to have bouncy castles. There's going to be food vendors. There's going to be the annual raffle with some amazing prizes. So it's a welcome back to school. It's not just for new parents. It's for all of our parents. But we would love to see you there with your children, building our community, because it is really important that you all feel a sense of belonging here at Cranley Abu Dhabi. We have also got our Wellbeing in School reinspection taking place on the 26th of September. So again, thank you for your feedback. This will be a full day of all of our provision being inspected. And thank you to those parents who came last week to the prep coffee morning, looking specifically at wellbeing. Because again, it's about educating you guys to be able to help your children if and when issues arise. So I'm going to, in a moment, welcome our speaker for today into the call. Catherine Knibbs is and I have to check my notes for this, I'm really sorry. She is a cyber trauma therapist. In other words, she's a trauma therapist, but as part of her other expertise role, she is a human behavior technologist. She has worked extensively with young people, with families. She puts biology and technology together, I think is how we can introduce Kath. She speaks prolifically at events, at conferences. We were talking on Saturday. We actually met for the first time online on Saturday. We probably could have spoken all afternoon, but we had a really, really interesting talk about how these two areas are coming together, and understanding of what our children are doing online, and how it's not just about keeping them safe, but it's about building them up as humans to understand the world they live in. I will introduce her into the call. I would love for anyone who has any questions to either add them to Facebook. I can see we are connected. So thank you, Mrs. Darby, for that. We are now connected. If you've got any questions as you're going through, any comments, please pop them into either Facebook or on YouTube. But we're also aware that some of your questions and comments might be a little bit more sensitive or confidential if they're about your own children. So please do send me an email if you want to ask a specific question and you would rather that we did that anonymously for you. My email, I normally put it on, I forgot, I'm so sorry. It's lhewitt, so just my first L and then hewitt@cranley.ae. But please do send me an email if you would like to ask a question. So I'm going to invite Kath into the call. I'm just going to add her into the stage. She's zooming in live from the UK. Hi, Kath. Good morning.
Good morning, Liz, and good morning, everybody else. And yeah, it is morning. quite not too early.
No, a little bit earlier there than it is for us here. Yeah, and a little bit cooler, I have to say as well. This last week's been particularly hot.
Mm-hmm.
Those of you who see us every morning out on the crossing will know it's been, it's been particularly warm this week with the humidity. So hopefully that's going to drop down very soon. Kath, tell us a bit about yourself, because I can try and introduce you, but I'm sure that wasn't a great job. So tell us a bit more about what you do.
Well, I wear a number of hats. I am a mum. So I would like to make that like quite often I say I'm a human being and I'm a mum. They're the two most important things that have really been part of my life. But my children are as old as the internet. So my children are in their mid to late 20s. My background is formerly I was an engineer in the army, and I'm a mechanical, electrical and electronic engineer by trade. And I left the army, got married, had children, and I went into the world of computing really, really early on. And around about 2010, decided to retrain and go into psychotherapy. And in that time, I've been a relationships and sex education teacher. I have also done a myriad of kind of jobs and counselling and qualifications. I went and did a degree, and from there got really, really interested in the brain and cognition and how we work as human beings. And whilst training as a psychotherapist, and I'm primarily a child psychotherapist, I do work with adults, but my work is primarily with children who have been sexually abused. And around about 2012, I started to notice that a lot of the stuff coming into my clinic, a lot of the work that I was watching with my children being teenagers at the time, was around this phrase cyber trauma. So I will talk about that shortly. But the other hats that I wear, I'm almost at the end of my PhD. I am an author of 4 books to date. I'm currently writing books number 5 and book number 6 as we speak. I've done some journal articles in peer-reviewed areas, so I'm an academic as well as a clinical researcher. And in between all of that, I spend my time with my hobbies, which include VR, gaming, and pretty much reading.
Well, I'm exhausted just listening, Kath, to be honest. I mean, yeah, I don't know how you find the time. It's obviously such a passion of yours. And I think that's the thing with passions. You always find time, don't you? I know on Saturday when we were talking, we had a chat about language and being down with the kids. I mean, they all think you know nothing, and it's difficult. We didn't grow up in this world. And they do, and I know that's part of your gaming, is that you are actually very aware of what is going on the ground, you know, for the kids, the language they use, the terminology they use, and that obviously helps you. I just don't think I could keep up anymore. The very fact that we still mention Facebook to our kids, you know, and it's just not, they laugh.
Yeah, that's definitely not one of the platforms that the children really use much now. It's not to say they don't, but certainly, and this is one of the reasons why I've been writing the books. I've also created some resources so that people can start conversations, because of course my daily conversations include words like glitching and avatars and Bitcoin and, you know, some of the new emerging technologies. And some parents and some professionals just want, how do I talk to my child about gaming? How do I talk to them about? So we'll cover that in terms of the what's, the whys, the hows, the wheres today.
Thanks. Okay, brilliant. Right. I'm just going to ask you to pop the PowerPoint in. It seems to have disappeared.
I will. Yep, that's
thank
because
you.
I was...
add that in. It's just pop back out. I'm just going to reiterate this talk is for parents. So those of you who may have young children in the background, you know, there may be questions that come in that talk about issues that are sensitive to our children. So I am just going to ask everyone to be aware of that. And if they are listening to this asynchronously, or you listen to it in the car, because let's be honest, most of our parents will listen offline. Although I can just see at the moment we've got 50 people, nearly 50 people listening right now, which is excellent. So welcome to you all. I'm going to hand over to Kath. I'm going to let her, she's the expert. I'm going to let her do the talking, and any questions, please do let me know. lhewitt@cranley.ae, and Kath, I will come back in at the end of your presentation and we'll have a good chat around.
Okay. So, yep, just to let you know, I can see the chat if it pops up with any questions. And I've been doing this for quite some time. So if I see let me just turn that off. Let me go back one, because I've just realised you can see my mouse over there. So, okay, where I'm coming in today is as a parent talking to parents. So this online space is an interesting concept in itself. What we as adults think about as the online space, children do not. So the best example of this is we've grown up with radios, with television, with cars, with kettles, with toasters. We wouldn't think of those objects as technology and call them technology in a way that we tend to talk about technology nowadays. So young people, so this includes all of the tiny people all the way through to people who are late 18 to maybe even 25 years of age, their world has been around digital technology. And that digital technology has been such a part of their lives that I'm really curious, and this is why I've been writing the books, as to what that actually has done to child development. Because if you at any point have a conversation with Liz and think about psychology, lots and lots of the theories talk about technology separately to child development, and child development tends to follow the models pre-internet, which is really, really interesting that for 27 years we haven't created new theories about what is happening to children's development. And how do we understand that? How do we understand children's lives in an online space when we're making it a separate thing to think about? So first of all, as a parent to other parents, you have survived your childhood, you are now an adult, and you have skills, you have lots and lots of skills that enable you to deal with many of these problems. I think what often happens is mainstream media and certainly news outlets will have conversations and say, but children are really good at using technology and you're so old, you can't possibly understand this. So my first point before we go any further today is to say this isn't necessarily about technology. This is about parenting, and parenting comes from understanding and remembering your own childhood. So all of the behaviours that children engage in are very similar to those behaviours you engaged in, and they're going to be very, very similar the worldwide round. And this is one of the things that I'm starting to really get to have a conversation about, is even in different countries, children still follow child development processes, and they do that using technology the same way that we would have maybe had a favorite TV program that we wanted to watch. And when I get to the slide that talks about games and gaming and a lot of the lay people's terminology, you can really see that this is children being children surrounded by technology. So I do want to say that quite often I think the narrative that we're surrounded by is we don't understand this space, we're too old to understand this space, our children are being mesmerized and tricked by the companies, and yet this is about parenting. So if we go through the conversation, what I'm going to do is take you through really simply the processes of child development. Now, one of the things that I was really keen to do was share about a word that Liz and I talked about called fobbing. And I don't follow these often trendy type words such as phobbing, because actually we as adults are also using technology, but because we use technology, and sometimes we use it really, really often and ubiquitously, and it's part of our lives as well, that actually there is an effect on children and how they are in relationship with their carers, their parents, and people who take care of them. So very, very briefly, when babies are born, they follow a process called attachment. And this process is all about survival. And in the, let's call it old literature, so in the old studies, what people studied was how babies interact with parents and how parents interact with babies. And of course, in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, when these studies were being done, people were not holding devices and tablets, and the way that we raised babies in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s did not include this ever-present technology. One of the things that I've started to notice, and this is over really the last 13 years, is how children behave in and around technology and how parents behave in and around technology. Now, if you imagine that you've just had your baby and you are on social media and you might have 300 friends, one of the things we like to do as parents is talk about, hey, look, I've just had a baby. This baby's absolutely beautiful. Here's pictures of my baby. What you will find as a parent is that there might well be, let's say you've got 300 friends, 300 pieces of advice coming at you constantly about how to parent. And it's overwhelming. So parents can find themselves in a space where they become overwhelmed about the correct way to parent. And I'm doing that air quotes thing there. And bearing in mind, there's usually more than one parent. So that could be 300 friends of mums and 300 friends of dads, or 300 friends of aunties, uncles, grandmas, health visitors, everybody else who gets involved in an infant's life, all telling you how to be the perfect parent. And what that can do is leave parents feeling slightly overwhelmed. So they're constantly looking towards their babies and worrying about certain noises, facial movements. Is this normal? And what I'm starting to notice, and this has been happening for a long time now, is that parents will constantly check, whether it's Dr. Google or Facebook friends, as to, is this normal for my baby's development? And some people might be saying, well, you need to be sitting your baby up at about 5 months of age, and you need to be weaning them at X number of weeks. And the way we now parent is very, very anxiety provoking. So when we look at what is considered attachment theory, if you are an anxious parent, you are likely to be anxious in front of your child, and that can actually bring about an anxiety feeling in the baby. So attachment styles are changing, not just because of babies and technology being around them, but because of the kind of pressure we're all under. And conversely, when babies are born, there is a lot of what I was explaining to Liz on Saturday is distracted parenting. That's that parent who is constantly looking for the advice, looking for reassurance, because the one thing we want to do is be a great parent. And if we're being told that we have to do this or that or the other, it can make us very anxious. But also, and there is no blame meant in this next sentence, imagine being a baby that is born and is in a house where mum and dad or caregiver, carer, whoever it is looking into a phone and not looking at you. That baby then begins to make assumptions about the world. And I talk about having a 3-parent family. So the standard way of perceiving that is mum, dad, and this device, whether it's an iPad, a tablet, something that constantly takes pictures. The parents are sometimes taking pictures of the baby and then looking into the device at the baby. And of course, babies don't necessarily understand that that is an image of them. And it becomes a very confusing environment for a lot of babies. So babies are becoming more anxious as a general rule, and parents are more anxious as a general rule. And this is changing the way that children now behave in relationships. So in my second book, I talk about something called e-attachment. So I've changed it from attachment to e-attachment. I believe, and it is a belief because I'm creating a theory, that children are more anxious because of this ever presence of devices, and parents are more anxious. And that's really changing how we relate to each other. Now, what we definitely know about neurobiology and relationships and attachment is if you are anxious, you are continuously going to look around for ways to lower that anxiety. Now, for babies, they don't really have a way to regulate their own emotions. So I'm going to use a little bit of therapy language now. So they need another person to help co-regulate. And this is what we do as parents. When our toddler is not coping very well, often you'll hear terms like toddler tantrum, meltdowns. These are the moments that we show up as parents and we help regulate our child. We calm them down. And I'll show you a little later how this works. And when children get to the age of 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, one of the things that often happens, and it is not done to really, it's done to keep the peace a lot of the time. Children will be handed devices. So children are learning that this thing that they get to hold can sometimes be the thing that helps regulate their emotions. So what we've got going on at the moment, and this leads to my TEDx talk, which I'm sure that Liz will share the link with you afterwards, that when we are looking to have our needs met, when we're looking for relationships, we generally look to another person. And if the other person is distracted or anxious or cannot regulate us, we don't learn how to do it for ourselves. Now, if you look to the mainstream media, you will see at the moment that lots and lots of young people, generally it's the adolescents at the moment, are being diagnosed with high rates of disorders such as ADHD, ADD, ASD. These are all the letters that generally mean huge levels of social difficulties and attentional difficulties. And I'm really getting to a point, especially here, where I'm hoping that you can see the link between, well, if you were born and your early childhood space was quite anxious, you're going to have anxiety. And a lot of the adolescents that I do work with have a huge amount of anxiety. They don't want to pick the phone up and make a phone call. They don't know how to go and introduce themselves to other people because this human to human connection has been lowered or is missing or hasn't been there as a stable part of their early development. So child development has changed because of technology over the last 27 years. So one of the things that we will definitely keep coming back to today is that real world, face-to-face conversations are the thing that helps us manage our own emotions. And that's why, as a therapist, I do what I do. And I'm noticing that lots and lots of the children I've worked with over the last 10 years really struggle to do that. And as a result, that's one of the things that I'm trying to help people understand, is that this isn't something we've done on purpose. This has been a slow development over the last 20 years. And where you are as parents now is probably feeling a little bit like, well, maybe I do that. And that's one of the things I want to really say. And I say this in my TED talk, is I also engaged in the distracted parenting at times. I would be busy doing emails and I'd have the laptop sat on my knee and my children would be in the room. And I might not have spoken to them for half an hour. And luckily, I am a person who because of being a therapist, recognizes sometimes that this isn't okay. And it was a lot of my own learning and a lot of the learning with the parents and having conversations, and what children would tell me, like, well, mum's always on a phone, or dad's always on the computer, or dad's playing games and he doesn't have dinner with us, or those kinds of conversations that have gone on for the last 12, 13 years. That this isn't to say you are bad parents. This is to say we have all been enticed by technology. So when it comes to what we do online, there's a couple of things that I want to show you about how and why we behave like we do with technology. But I am going to quote a line from my TEDx talk, that if we do not get our needs met out here, we will go looking in there. And I mean in there to mean through the device into the space of social media, gaming, etc., etc. So just to elaborate a little bit more in terms of child development and technology, to give you a little bit of a framework, we tend to look at child development as following stages. So you have infancy and toddlerhood, and young child, middle child, adolescent, and then we talk about being an adult. So just to give you the stages there, and these are not concrete ages. There's usually 0 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to about 7, 7 to 12, and adolescence. And I don't know if anybody knows this, but adolescence is around about 12 to 25 to 28 years of age. And that's how long it takes for a brain to mature to be able to fully regulate themselves. And I'm sure you have heard of the phrase of the teenage meltdown being very similar to the toddler's meltdown. And one of the reasons is to do with brain development. Now, I'm not going to take you too deep into brain development or anything like that today, but certainly these stages are pretty much replicated in the online space as to what children want to do and where they want to go. Now, I use the phrase modus operandi because when we pick up our devices, they are a medium and a tool. They are a medium through which we can have conversations with people, and that is a direct parallel to what we do in the real world. So, for example, and I'm going to be very careful that I don't give any details about my clients too much, but for some children, if mum and dad are not in a fantastic relationship and they do not talk to their children, and perhaps they're arguing on an evening, a child will feel distress. And the way that children manage their distress is they find something to do. Often it can be things like biting their nails. They may go and read a book. And because of the internet being around since 1996, children can now go onto games, go onto social media, and perhaps they can find somebody who can help them move that distress out of the way. And a lot of the time, this is what we're doing as adults, as well as the children doing it. We might feel left out of something. So this is where those acronyms of FOMO come from, fear of missing out. Actually, this is about attachment. This is about being included. And we don't like to be excluded. So one of the things that we will do is we will use the device to find people who might be similar to us. So when I talk in a minute about gaming and why children are doing what they're doing, it's because there is a purpose. And often again, it's this mainstream media and the narrative that surrounds us. You can be on and you can be doing what's called a doom scroll. Well, actually, even when you're doing something called a doom scroll, even as a young child, it is meeting a need. So one of the things I talk with my parents about, and one of the things I'm going to help you understand here, is what need is the device meeting? What need is the social media meeting? What need is the tool? Now, if you think all the way back to when we were in lockdown, that medium And that tool was being used at the same time for different things. You had adults who had to do their work, children who had to attend school, but also this is the place where they socialized with their friends. It was the place where they might have been reading a book. They might have been watching a video on YouTube. There's lots and lots of different things that people were doing on their devices. And it was a tool that enabled them to do it, and a medium in which they could connect with other people or connect to workplace, after school clubs, WhatsApp groups, you name it. So if you have noticed, I do not have the term, and I will not have the term screen time within this presentation, nor do I talk about screen time when I'm talking to parents, because you have to go to this modus operandi. What is it that the child is doing, and why are they doing that, and what need is it meeting? So this is a way to understand what children are doing and why they're doing it and where they're going. And then we come to the kinds of problems that exist in this space. So let's have a look at the big topics, because these are usually the questions and the things that people think about. So before I go to gaming, addiction, problematic, or any of those kind of terms, I want you to think of a football match, okay? What they call soccer in America. I want you to think about a football match. And we often have the World Cup, and, you know, every couple of years, lots of people get involved in watching it. And some people get to go to the actual physical football match. Now, if I was to ask you, how long does a football match last? You know the answer to that. How many halves? Well, I mean, the clues in the title there, but, you know, how many times do the players go onto the field? How many players are there? Which direction do the players play? And what is the general rule about who wins and who doesn't? Now, football is a game that we all understand in terms of we have grown up with this sport in our lives in some way, shape or form. It was played in the playground. School had teams. You would watch it on the television. Your friends might be fans of the football. I'm going to go with that word, fans. It's actually a shortened version of fanatic. Okay, that means somebody who has a passion. And maybe you might have been so fanatic that you were Ronaldinho, Ronaldo, David Beckham. You can tell my age here because I'm going back a few years to pick the players. You might be thinking, oh my goodness, David Beckham was so good at football because he was fanatical. And he played football in his house, in the garden, at school, after school, on the way to school, on the way back from school. So I'm going to ask a question. Would you say David Beckham had a football addiction? Probably not. And this is one of the things to think about with gaming. So the word addiction has been, at the moment, it's been included in everything. Oh my goodness, I'm so addicted to buying shoes. Oh, I couldn't help it. I saw something in the sale and I'm just so addicted to low cost clothing that I couldn't help but buy it. I'm so addicted to my TV program. I'm so addicted to this coffee, etc., etc., etc. Now, gaming is a really interesting space. So I'm going to take the football analogy and I'm going to say there are different types of games, and different types of games mean that the child is involved in a different process. So you might have heard of something called an RPG, which is a role-playing game. You might have heard of builds, if your child plays Fortnite or Minecraft, something like that. So different games have different outcomes and different processes and different problems. And let's just take you back to the 1970s and 80s when arcade games were around. You might have seen games like Space Invaders, where Pac-Man. And the whole point of those games was to get to the next level and to be the best, either in the arcade area or the best at school, the best in the year. And it was competitive and it was fun. And what people would do if they had home computers, so this is my experience in terms of being a young child, the home computer provided a space where I could go and play Space Invaders and Pac-Man, and I could get better at those games. If I was playing football or hockey, as I did as a young person, that would be called practice. And what's currently happening is we're perceiving the gaming space as being addictive. And the reason that that word gets used is because it's about the child coming off the game. So I'm going to give you some solutions, because this is always helpful. If your child is playing a game that's about role playing or taking their time on let's say a quest, then what will happen in that game is there will be certain stages in that game where they can save their progress. Other games, like Fortnite, are games that are played like football. There is a 45-minute time limit, and on occasions there are games that will do extra time, and sometimes the games end early because if you think about Fortnite, there's 100 players and it's the first one to be number one out of the 100 after everybody is killed off. So that game is very different to something like Minecraft, where you can move through the game and save your progress. So one of the pieces of language that I really want to help you with is ask your children, is this a game with a save point? Is this a game with a time limit? And that will really, really help you bring the child off the game when you want them to. Okay. And also this is something I had to engage in terms of when's your next save point? When was your last save point? When you get to your next save point, turn it off. When you get to the end of the game, meaning the time limit one, turn it off. That took away so much of the discord, so much, and I don't mean the app Discord, that took away so much of the anxiety, because I was watching with my children, and I use gaming in therapy. I'm able to see where the child is heading, and that allows me to understand what it is that the child is doing and how to allow them to get to the place that they need to be. And again, it then helps me maybe, I don't know, put my schedule around what's happening, or put their schedule around what's happening. Now, you do know that children will say just one more game, just 5 more minutes. And if you take an active interest in what the game is, you will quickly see how or what they're doing. And you can kind of see, really, are they trying to get better at the game? Are they trying to compete with their friends, etc., etc., etc.? And another tiny little piece of advice is, generally, young people want to use headsets because they can talk to their friends and it keeps the sound in of the game. Often parents will walk in and say, now, come on, Billy, off the game, your dinner's ready. And you only see your child with the headset on and the screen. And sadly, what you've forgotten about is the crowd that's at the football match, all the other players that might be listening in. So there are times that you might want to come in and wave at your child and say, put it on mute. Right, what is it that you're doing? How are you playing the game? And these are all tips that I give to my parents. So hopefully that's going to give you a little bit of an understanding that addiction to games is a very, very difficult thing to even think about, because it's not addiction in its psychopathological format. It's a word that gets used because generally we're angry, and we use that word to say, get off the game, you're so addicted to it. However, gaming can be problematic if and when children will not do their homework, come and eat their tea, get washed, go to bed, etc., etc., etc. That's what we call problematic gaming. Now, in the diagnostic manuals, there is no such thing as gaming addiction. There is recently an addition of something called gaming disorder, but the prerequisites for that are you have got to have been doing this problematic type gaming for over a year. So even then, it's a problem that has existed for a very, very, very long time, not just this evening or this morning, get your shoes on, we're off to school. and the child doesn't want to come off the game, you really do need to look at it as a process. And again, what need does the gaming meet? Well, it allows a child mastery. I can solve a problem. So let's think of Zelda. Okay, so this is one of the games that often comes on the Switch, and children will tell me that they've got to the next level, they've solved the problem. But also, what that allows the child to do is go to school and say to their friends, I'm on level X. So now there's healthy competition, there's discussions, there's relationships between the children because they have a shared interest. And sometimes gaming can be about, actually, I didn't have a great time at school today. There was, maybe an incident in the yard, the playground, where somebody said something quite nasty and it really hurt me. And actually, I don't want to think about it for a bit. So I'm just going to go on the game, and I'm going to use the game to manage my stress. Now, when I'm working with the adults, they will generally opt for things like alcohol or exercise or going for a walk. Children cannot access the same number of substances or processes that adults can. They are very limited, and generally they will pick up their phone or their console and they will use that to calm down. Sometimes they get excited, and of course they do, because games are exciting. If they weren't exciting or interesting, nobody would play them. So when we look at what children are doing in terms of gaming, it's what's the modus operandi? Who are they speaking to? Maybe it's somebody that they have a good relationship with that they don't talk to in the school because maybe they're in a different year. Maybe they get to talk through strategies with their friends. And maybe if they are children with social difficulties like autism, then this allows them to have conversations in a way that's safe and regulated as well. Now, I will put the addendum here. These spaces are not always 100% safe either. That's the stuff about e-safety that we need to think about, and I'll do that shortly. Again, the other big topic is social media. Now, you'll see that I've put social in quotes because the clue is in the title. The reason we use social media is because it's about socializing. And for this, I want you to think about what you do when you use social media. Is it to post photos in the same way that you would do 20 years ago when people came around to your house and you would get your photo album out? This is when we went on holiday. These are the spaces we've been to. Or do you want to have a conversation with somebody perhaps that you haven't seen for a while or you don't live near? When we start to think about why children do what they do online, they're not doing anything different to what they would do out in the real world, and they're not really doing anything different to what we would. As I said, their choices are limited into how they can regulate themselves. So I'm very quickly just going to go through some of that process here as to how you can help regulate your children. Now, right at the beginning, Liz introduced me as a cyber trauma expert. Excuse me. I do have my academic definition here. It is very, very long, as you can see, because technology is very complicated. And in today's world, we are using the terminology online harm. And what I'm going to do is make this really, really simple. Cyber trauma is any trauma that occurs as a result of use of technology or through technology. So you don't have to remember this academic definition, but it's to let you know that there are many, many ways that people can encounter material or text or voice or audio, all of it. And it can affect a child much more easily than it does an adult. And what we tend to do at the minute is we make assumptions about what we consider might be frightening or upsetting rather than what the child might feel. And this is down to something called mirror neurons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a video. So.
There you go. Yeah. You heard that. It's going to sink. Oh. got it. I'm going to the stairs. What? What is it?
I want you to notice how you're feeling. And I also want to say, if anybody has a phobia of sharks, this is the time to turn away. I'm not going to show you anything massively distressing, but this is something I want you to pay attention to. What do you notice? Oh.
Can you jump? Yeah. Where is that? It's going to stink. Oh. I got it. I'm going to the stairs. What? What is it? Oh.
Okay. Some people might want to feedback in terms of just in a minute, and I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to try and finish so we've got enough time for questions. What I want you to notice is, did you at any point hold your breath? Did you feel anxious? Did you feel like you wanted to help the person? Did you feel like you wanted to kick the shark? Did you feel anything in your body? And how many of us, excuse me, have actually encountered a shark? Very few. But we have been brought up with many, many mainstream media movies that give us this feeling. And sometimes this is what children are doing. They're looking to find resonant feelings online. But the reason I'm showing you this video is to show you just how quickly your body, so not your brain, your body can be affected by something that you're watching. And this is one of the things that I want to say, that regardless of some of the things that we think are not scary for children, there can be a lot of things online that can actually frighten a child in terms of their body regulation. So very quickly, I'm going to show you another resource, but I'm not going to play the video. I have on YouTube a video called The Polyvagal Motorway of Wellness. Now, this is a theory about how we manage our nervous systems. And what we want to do is we want to be in the middle of this motorway or freeway, and we want to be in this green middle lane, which is called your window of tolerance. This is the space where you can manage anxiety, sadness, all of the emotions without getting too distressed. Now, we do need to be able to mobilize to safety. That's to move quickly, like that gentleman just did in the video. He swam. He was definitely in his red zone. He had to get out of there. And you might have noticed that your anxiety level increased. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you another video that's hopefully going to bring you straight back into that green zone. And I want you to think about how you might do this with your own child.
What's up?
Oh, done it again.
I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you.
Okay, so I'm going to end with this lovely scene of a beautiful beach, beautiful weather, somewhere that we might all like to go on holiday. And I want you to notice again, how do you feel right now? Are you now calm? But what about if I went da-dum, da-dum, dum 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 dum? You can see that I can change how an image feels very quickly just by making a noise. So what I'm going to do is, because it's now 9 minutes to the hour, I am going to stop presenting and I am going to head back where Liz can come back in if we've got any questions.
Wow, I've just been on a mad journey with you there. And you know, it's so funny, Kath, thank you for that. I think that we talked about that video, didn't we, with the shark? And I knew, you said to me, you know, most people find they held the breath, and I still held my breath. And I was very aware of the fact I was holding my breath, but I still held my breath. And I also have to say that's one of the cutest videos I've ever seen with the little girl as well, particularly. You know, we teach about mirror neurons in year 12. Maybe year 13, year 12 in psychology. It's not a new thing to me, but really interesting how you're applying this to the use of technology and to trauma. You know, we did speak a lot on Saturday about what we saw as videos when we were younger and the effect it had on us. You know, those, you know, for me, it was Freddy Krueger. Still can't look at an image of him without having a physical reaction. And, you know, I was probably about 9 years old when I was kind of forced to watch that movie. And it does scare us. What are our children seeing online? I think, first of all, before I even look at any of the questions, how do we prevent them seeing these things online? Or is that impossible?
I think as much as we have the legislation coming out that's going to remove some of this material, there are spaces that the material will be shared. Unfortunately, as Meta moves to encrypted messenger, there is no way to prevent things being sent on some of the platforms in their messaging type systems. So maybe WhatsApp, Discord, Facebook. Now, that's not to say that we need to take our children off everything. What we need to be able to do as parents, and it's the reason I show that latter part, is if our children see something, you know, you've just had an experience of watching a video with a shark. Actually, you need to be able to upregulate or downregulate. So if your children are, we tend to use terms like dissociated. So if they've become very daydreamy, they're not present, you might need to upregulate them. That's give them something to do. So maybe a bit of play, maybe a bit of jostling and thinking about movement, versus what I've just showed you, which is how to downregulate, which was some beautiful co-regulation between father and son and mother and daughter. And they're absolutely wonderful ways, because I took you up in what we call our nervous system regulation. I use those videos to bring your nervous system back down just a little bit. Again, this is parenting 101, because actually we would do this if our children saw something or if they'd hurt their toe, etc., etc.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
you, as the parents listening, you probably know how to do this already.
Yeah, and I think we discussed as well, didn't we? Our children are going to see things. The fear comes from them not telling us they've seen something, because they're afraid we'll take away the device. So what we're doing there is actually creating a secrecy around what they see, the trauma that they may see, because then if they tell mummy or daddy, oh, I saw this video and it scared me, our first reaction as parents is often, Right, you're not going on that. You're not. I'm going to take away, like you talked about. I mean, the medium and the tool. I'm also then going to take away the way that you're communicating with your friends. I'm going to take away the way you communicate with your cousins. You know, and you're actually taking away that because we're not differentiating them between the medium and the tool.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that for me as a mum going through, you know, this is fascinating in terms of just not, you know, building that trust.
Yeah. That fits with. So there's a question here about children with sleepovers. This is the hardest question, and I'm glad this has been asked actually, because it is the one that I tend to focus on. This is the difficulty that we all faced as children when we snuck round to somebody else's house and watched the movies we weren't allowed to watch at home. Okay. Again, the behavior that children are engaging in is no different to what we did when we were children. The difficulty is, as Janice has asked here, what do you do when the other family allows their children to have their devices overnight, or allows them to watch particular programs or be on certain apps? Again, this is where parenting, and I'm going to call it parenting 101, is ask the other parent, what are your values around technology? And sometimes you may have to make decisions based on your own values that don't align with the sleepover family, and that can be really difficult. And again, if you are co-regulating your child and you say, look, you know, you can't go around to Billy's because Billy's mum allows him to go on these things that I want to protect you from. So it's not about preventing you having friends, it's about I'm trying to protect you from perhaps seeing stuff, going on devices. Or you could say, well, why doesn't Billy come over here? But I want to have a conversation with his mum first, where we talk about devices go on in the hallway overnight and we don't go on the... Again, that's a conversation parents need to have with each other, and it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, but necessary. I mean,
it is.
It's a great question, and I think, you know, it is that is how was I watching Nightmare on Elm Street at age? I can tell you now, it wasn't my parents. It was, you know, it was at a sleepover, and it was definitely because there was older brothers and sisters, and it is that. And I suppose you know, you're absolutely right. It hasn't changed. It's the means that we're giving our children access to these things has changed. So and it's about being brave, having those conversations that, you know, like you say, might be awkward, but definitely worth it. We've got a couple of other questions. Sorry, I'm just going to pop onto from the backstage. Okay. How do you balance delaying our children having a phone and having the ability to go online versus making it an obsession for them to then have a phone? Like, at what age would you recommend, with all of your experience, that we do allow our children access to devices?
So again, it's in this space where, I mean, you can delay it all you want. Children can go elsewhere. Children will be on technology at schools. So it's conversations with children. Okay, yes, you can have a smartphone. However, this app, and this app won't be going on it. And that's where the parental controls come in. And that's where I would certainly say definitely seek e-safety protocols in terms of what you can and can't access. And again, sometimes having the conversation with your child, I know you want that. This is like that designer pair of trainers. This is like that. In my days, it was a head bag. Okay. So at school, it was like, I wanted the latest head bag. And again, you have to think about monetary value, values of the family, discussions with why it's not appropriate just yet, and also why you're stopping your child going on that is not because you're trying to punish them, it's because you're trying to protect them. And children don't want to hear that when they want a thing. And that's the hard part about being a parent, is understanding you are not their friend, you are their parent.
And does that go back to what you talked about, is if they are obsessed with it, what is the need then? What need isn't being met, if that's in their friendship groups or in their communications? Or, you know, since we talked on Saturday, I've been, you know, thinking about this a lot in terms of, why do our children reach for the device so often? Why is it, you know, are they scared of what's going on without them? Are they not having enough one-to-one time with their friends? Because you'll see teenagers and they all sit in a row with the phones, don't they? You know,
as do the parents.
Yes, the parents, I've got another question that's popped on as well. Non-negotiable rules for children's technology use.
Again, parenting. So I would say those rules, those ones are your own household rules. So mine was no devices after, because I understand sleep, I understand the child and adolescent brain. And again, of course, my children circumnavigated it. That's the whole process of parenting. You think you've got your framework, you think you've got your rules, and then you have to go back and renegotiate. And that's part of parenting, is understanding you don't make the rules and they are forever concrete. You need to change and adapt them as children. And again, age, stage, maturity, you know your own children, you know that they are children, they are going to try and get around the rules and circumnavigate them. And again, learning whether it's a punishable move, and I don't necessarily agree with punishments, but I also do agree with consequences. So some parents use punishment, and I'm not here to tell everybody how to parent. I think there's enough of that happening in the mainstream narrative about you're not doing it properly, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. It's hard. This is the hardest job in the world.
Totally agree. Another question. If your child's gone through trauma of another child leaking sensitive information or private conversations online, I suppose it's cyberbullying, isn't it? It is. How do you support your children through that?
So again, I would think back to, children can be incredibly mean when we look at it through an adult lens. Children behaving as they do are not necessarily thinking in the same way we do. So in terms of leaking some information, maybe that's about one child wanting to hurt another one because they said something, or they've upset them, or they excluded them. There's usually a reason. So I'm not saying, it's about the person who does and the person who is done unto. But what we would do years and years ago, before the internet, if somebody told a secret, is we would say, that's really hard. And I can understand you've been betrayed. There's now mistrust. This is a difficult space to navigate. And here I am to co-regulate you through that space. And that's how we build resilience. We build it in relationship through co-regulation until we become the adult that can self-regulate ourselves.
Okay, so it goes back to that. Brilliant. And are there any ethical considerations for parents while we're monitoring our child's usage? I know on Thursday, I think it was during the prep coffee morning, we talked about this. We talked about, I do believe it's the right thing to do to have your children's apps on my phone. That's what I do. It gives me a sense of peace, at least. But someone's asking, is it right to do?
There is something about, and I've got into debates with a lot of professionals around this. Under the age of, so in the UK, we have something called Gillick competency, which is around 13, 14. Children can go for sexual health advice without our knowledge as parents. There is also something about, it depends on your child and the age and stage at which they are and why you're monitoring. So some parents, and I'm going to use a phrase that's from therapy, can be intrusive. So what is it that you're monitoring? Why are you monitoring it? And again, how long would you do that for? And to what age? I would certainly say, again, it's stage, development, maturity. Children have a right to privacy as well. Yeah. So there's this delicate balance about, if your child was going to play out in the street, would you stand and watch who they were playing with? Do you allow them a little bit of freedom? And if that freedom is then betrayed through, I don't know, maybe they engage in a behavior that you've said you didn't want them to do, for example, going off the street, you would then have that conversation and say, okay, because you went off the street, you now have to stay on the street for da-da-da-da-da. And the ethics behind this are you monitoring your children because it's a responsible thing to do, or are you being completely nosy and intruding into every aspect of their life? That's the dilemma.
Yeah, and it is a dilemma, isn't it? And I think that's going back to the whole, your TED Talk, the social dilemma. What is the social dilemma? As parents, we are, in the thick of this, trying to help our children. I know we're out of time. I have really, really enjoyed listening to you. I feel like, as you're going through talk, I was going back to my Gina Ford days, parenting advice and trying to get it right. And I laugh about those days now, but, there's so much that you've said that resonates. We are all, been sucked in by technology, haven't we? We're all there. We're all kind of, it's not just our children,
And I will say, we are all doing the best that we can with the knowledge that we have right now. And it's great 27 years down the line saying, oh, look at that. Some of these companies took our data. We didn't know that was happening then, but we do now. Yeah. So now we do better. And parents of young children and adolescents at the moment, you are navigating a really difficult time in human history. There are no explicit black and white answers here. You have to go with what you feel is right for your family. And sometimes you're going to get it wrong. And that's where reparation comes in. And you go, as I still have to with my adult children. Yeah, I didn't handle that one great there, did I? That wasn't the best sentence I could have ever used.
Yeah, and I think our children are going to get it wrong, and it's knowing what to do when, and it's having those conversations before it happens, not to, scare them into technology is bad, the internet is bad. It's just part of our lives now, and I think we all have to recognise that. It is Digital Safety Week. I will be popping on to the newsletter. We have access to the national online safety courses for parents, so parents can actually go on there, learn about more of the apps, learn about what's going on out there in the world of technology. So I'll be popping that onto the newsletter. I'll pop on your details as well, Kath, if that's all right. If anyone does want to reach out
I am
to you.
I am going to wave. I have lots and lots of resource cards, my tech toolkit. So there's ones with lots of images on, and some of the language that gets used, like live streaming, multiplayer. It's a way to start conversations for parents who are stuck. And it's about saying, what's your favorite? How do you get on with? Who do you talk to? And again, conversations. That's how we navigate this space.
Perfect. And are they available on your website?
They are, yes.
Okay.
And the artwork on them is incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Thank you. Right, so we're going to end it there. Thank you so much to everyone who's listened. Thank you to the CCC members in the background for fielding questions. Thank you to the people who have been brave enough to ask questions online as well. So, Kath, it's been a pleasure. I'm sure we will work together again at some point in the future. And I think, the key message here is we're all just doing the best we can do. If we can support you in school in any way, please do reach out, and have a lovely rest of the week. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you.